What's up guys, welcome back to Kit Guru and welcome back to another one of our custom build projects. I've been teasing this one on the channel for a couple of months, but we've had, shall we say, some logistical problems that have been beyond our control, which has held this project back a little bit. But today we can finally make a start on it. As you can probably tell, this project is sponsored by Fractal Design. So we've got one of their cases, power supply and some fans to use in the build. The case, I'm planning a lot of mods to the case. In fact, that is going to be the key focus area of this custom build project. But as well as Fractal Design, we've also had help from scan.co.uk in supplying the core components of the system. EK Water Blocks have supplied us with the cooling as well. We'll have a look at that in a bit. But before I jump into the mods, I want to take a look at the core components that we're going to be using for this system. The CPU for the system is the AMD Ryzen 7 5800X. This is the 8-core, 16-thread CPU, great gaming CPU. For the motherboard, we are using the Asus ROG Strix B550E gaming motherboard. Really nice looking motherboard. I like the mostly black design with these little pink highlights as well, which is going to work great with the theme of the system, because what I want to do is I want to keep it quite dark and moody, this system, but I want to have some high contrast to it. So I'm going to pick out some areas of this motherboard and other areas of this system to paint or to colour in some high contrast colours, make them really stand out. So that is the theme of the system as well, or partly the theme of the system is this high contrast colour that's going to be a good contrast between the black. So there's the motherboard and CPU. For memory, it's the Corsair Dominator Platinum RGB. This is a 32GB kit, two 16GB sticks, and it's DDR4 3600. For graphics, we have a Palette RTX 3080 Gaming Pro. This is how it looks standard, pretty nice looking card. Decent backplate, but we're going to be removing all that anyway, and we're going to be water cooling it with an EK Water Blocks cooler. And then for storage, we have two WD Black SN850 drives, so a 1TB drive for the operating system and for the main drive, and then a 2TB drive for additional storage. These are the SN850s, so these are PCIe Gen 4 M.2 NVMe drives. And then on to the Fractal stuff. So the power supply is the Fractal Ion Plus 2, and this is an 860 watt power supply, so it should be plenty for the components that we have, and it's an 80 plus platinum rated power supply. Probably not going to do a lot of mods to the actual power supply unit itself, but I do plan to make some custom cables. Probably seen that I make my own custom cables before on the channel. The fans for the system are the Fractal Aspect 14 RGB PWM. These are 140mm fans. We plan to use 4 of these in the system. These have a speed range up to 1700 RPM. Should be alright for radiators. This central area of the fan blades lights up in RGB lighting, so we'll do something with that RGB lighting. And then the case is a favourite of mine. It's the Fractal Design Meshify 2. This is available in black and white. I'm not sure why we chose the white version actually, can't remember, but it's not going to stay white. I'm planning on doing a custom paint job to matching with the high contrast and black theme. Internally it is mainly black, and I'm probably going to paint some more areas of the internals black. But the plan with this case is to completely change the layout of the case inside. So I plan to flip the motherboard around 90 degrees and have the I/O ports at the bottom, and then the graphics card will be stood up vertically, not vertically like a normal vertical mount, but vertically this way. And then I plan to put radiator in the front and a radiator in the back. So I'm going to be modding that back panel, modding the motherboard tray. Obviously going to need an I/O port cut out on top of the power supply shroud. So it's going to be a flipped orientation and water cooled, obviously with EK water cooling. Radiators front and back, either an airflow path from front to back or back to front, not decided yet, depends how it looks with the fan layout. And also in the top of the case here, I plan to put either a distro plate or a flat reservoir converted into a distro plate. So that is the plan. We'll see how it turns out, no doubt, over the next couple of videos, because this is not just, there's going to be a single video, there's too much to fit into one video. with this, so there will be a few videos in this series until we get this project finished. As well as those parts that are going to make up the core components of the system, we've also had help from EK Waterblocks in supplying all the parts for the custom loop. So we have an EK Quantum Magnitude CPU water block, the one for AM4, it's a black acetal version, and the GPU water block is the EK Quantum Vector RE block. This is the one for reference edition cards, which the palette card is, so that'll fit that perfectly without any trouble. We also have the EK Quantum Vector, and that's an active backplate for that card as well. In terms of pump res, I'm not using a pump res combo, so I'm going to be using a standalone EK Quantum Inertia D5 pump. I plan to mount that underneath the power supply shroud, you'll see why later on. And then for the reservoir, it's an EK Quantum Kinetic FLT 360. I'm hoping the 360 fits in. It might not. We might have to switch that out to a 240. But again, you'll see why very soon. And then for the fittings, it's the EK Quantum Torque fittings. These are just the straight ones for hard tubing. The hard tubing is 14mm diameter, so these are the 14mm fittings, and they are the satin titanium versions. The tubing I'm going to be using as well is the Corsair Hydro X XT hardline tubing, 14mm. I'm going to be using the satin transparent tubing as well. I like to use satin finished tubing. It just gives it a slightly different look to the system. I like the matte finish to it, and it's easy to work with as well. So let's have a look quickly at what I'm planning on doing with this system. So as I said earlier, I'm planning on rotating the motherboard and having not so much an inverted layout, but a 90-degree rotated layout. So the plan is to have the motherboard sat somewhere like that inside the case, obviously a bit straighter and with an I/O cut out on the bottom. I plan to feed the rear I/O cables and everything to the back of the case somehow. Not quite decided exactly how I'm going to do that yet, but that's the plan, to get them so you can plug them in at the back. If that's not possible, maybe I'll make a cutout somewhere where you can feed them through, plug them in, and then put on the side panel. But the motherboard's going to be in that position, and then graphics card is going to be sat vertically here with a water block on it. So the motherboard will be in that position, rotated by 90 degrees, I/O at the bottom. I'll probably try and reuse the standard rear I/O, de-rivet that from the case and put that on top of the power supply shroud and make a cut out there, so that all looks nice and neat. Instead of using a pump res combo, I'm going to have the standalone pump mounted underneath the power supply shroud and tubing coming up through the power supply shroud. And then at the top of the case, I plan to use either this 360 flat reservoir or 240, depends whether it fits. And what I want to do is remove the pump from that, block up that hole that will be left for the pump, and use this more as a distro plate rather than a pump res combo unit as it is at the moment. So I'll probably have to dismantle this a bit, put some baffles in there, and then I'm going to be drilling out and retapping with G1/4" threads holes for fittings. And I want the fittings to line up perfectly with the graphics card and the CPU block. And also I'm thinking the tubing as well. I want all the tubing to run vertically as well. Sounds like a lot, yes it is, but I'm hoping it shouldn't be too difficult. Once this is mounted up in the top of the case there, should be able to work out where the tubing needs to go quite easily. So hopefully that'll work, and maybe this 360 res might be a bit big looking at it now, but we'll see anyway. We'll see if we can fit it in. The reason I'm saying that might be a bit big is because I want to fit 2 radiators in here, but instead of in the normal locations at the front and the top, what I plan to do is have one at the front and one at the rear of the case. So the rear of the case will have to be completely redesigned and changed so that we can fit these radiators in. So I'll show you what I mean anyway. So here is a 280, so I plan to put a 280mm radiator at the front, which fits all right at the moment because this case does allow you to fit that in there. Fit a second radiator at the rear here, and I want them to be in line with each other in terms of front to back. So as you can see at the moment, the back of the case isn't designed for that. So we're going to have to do a redesign of this back of this case and make those fit in. So if we just bring that 360 res up, you see actually it's a bit close with those 280mm radiators. Potentially, instead of changing the size of the reservoir disto plate, I could maybe use slightly slimmer radiators. These are the Coolstream CE radiators, so these are 45mm thick. Could reduce these down to 30mm radiators, which may give me the extra space for this 360, but we will investigate that later and see which one looks better and works out better. I have a feeling now at the moment that the 240 flat reservoir might work better, and the thicker radiators, I think I prefer to keep those if possible. So the main focus area of this custom build will be the case mods. It's going to be enough work on its own, converting the layout of this case, making new panels, cutting panels out and getting everything to fit as I want it to. But there are other mods planned as well, such as a custom paint job for the outside of the case. I also maybe plan to highlight or pick out some of the small areas of the motherboard, parts of the GPU water block, CPU water block, to make them fit into the high contrast color scheme. May also do a custom paint job on the radiators as well, and other bits and bobs. Custom power supply cables as well. I'm going to make up some custom power supply cables from scratch. Again, they'll be made using the MD PCX sleeving, and they'll be made to fit into the high contrast color scheme as well. So I've already actually been working on the case mods. I've got 2 of these cases, so I thought best off getting 2 just in case anything goes wrong and we mess one of the panels up and have to start again. So let's have a look at what I've been doing so far. So this is where I've got up to so far. The back panel I've removed completely. This area is going to be cut out, and I've had a panel laser cut that is going to mount the rear radiator, rear fan. So this is going to be cut out. That's going to be put in its place. So all that will be removed from the rear of the case. In terms of the motherboard tray, that's the standard layout at the moment. So you can see there's a bit of a discrepancy between the heights of the motherboard tray and then this area here. The motherboard's going to span over to this area. So I've had a adapter plate laser cut, and then the screw holes have also been laser cut out. So that'll be placed in that position, and that will utilize the standard or the original motherboard screw holes. I'll be able to fix that down into position there. And then this plate is 3mm thick, and it brings it up to the same level here. On the power supply shroud, this part is obviously the rear I/O and the PCIe slots from the back of the original case panel. This is going to be installed or fitted here. There's obviously going to be some of the power supply shroud cut out. I might even cover that up so it's a solid piece and you can't see these vents. So that's going to be fixed in there and then riveted into position. You can also see I've made some markings on here as well. So the side of the motherboard is going to line up with this line and this line. And then when I put the radiators in position, so the radiator's in position at the front, it'll leave me approximately 20 to 23mm of space between the motherboard and the front radiator. And then if I put the radiator at the back with a fan on, pretty much the same gap, so that's evenly spaced out. The original PCIe slots and rear I/O will be retained and replaced, and you should just be able to pop the motherboard in position, and you can see it lines up with this marking here and marking here. We'll obviously push up to the rear I/O and the PCIe slots. They'll all be in the right position. Obviously there's going to be the standoffs. They're going to be re-drilled out of this new plate, and the motherboard will stand on original standoff, so it brings it up to the correct height for the PCIe slots and the rear I/O cutout. And you can also see I've made some markings here on this motherboard adapter plate. So obviously I'm going to need to make some cutouts for the EPS cables. I'll be using these fan headers for the CPU fan. RGB as well is up here. That's a 4-pin 12V RGB. Might not need to use that one, so we'll see whether I make a cutout for that. And then there's the 24-pin, the front USB 3, USB Type-C, and I'll have to make some cutouts as well, I think down this side of the motherboard as well, but that panel's removable, so that'll be pretty easy to do. So that's where I'm up to so far. I think what I'm going to do now is I'll probably have to remove the power supply shroud, as I need to cut that out. I'll take the original rear panel over to my other workbench, cut that out and then install the rear fan mounting into there. And yeah, I think we'll just have to take everything over to the other workbench, do some cutting, and hopefully these should all fit in position and everything should work as I've planned. So let's get on with that. So we've made a decent amount of progress. The motherboard adapter plate, that's in. Got the cutouts as well for the cable management holes. Those are okay at the moment. They might just want widen out slightly because the grommets are quite tight, but the adapter plate is 3mm thick aluminium, which is much thicker than the original motherboard tray, so that makes those grommets tight in there as well. I'm tempted to maybe glue those into position. I may have to readjust these cutouts down the side of the motherboard because it's quite close to the radiator. I might need a bit more space there for those cutouts, so I'll go back and have a look at those. The motherboard adapter plate as well, I've drilled out the holes, fitted the standoffs for the motherboard, which means that the motherboard actually fits in position now. And you can see as well the PCIe slot cutout down at the bottom. That's all in place and that's looking good as well. This all needs painting up, so I've just temporarily put the rivets back in just to make sure that everything lines up and works as I expected to. I'll probably de-rivet it all again and then paint all the panels separately. But it's working, it's looking good, and it's working out how I wanted it to. And you can also see as well around the back, the new back panels in. It's looking like we're going to go for a back to front airflow as well, because I think these fans, even though they're at the back of the system, they're going to look best with the fans being the right way around and having the Fractal logos and not being able to see the wiring and everything. So I think I'm going to stick with it that way around. I like how that's turned out, and you can see I've riveted that panel in. It basically just goes in place of the old panel, just cut out the area that I didn't need with the Dremel, tidied it up with a bit of sanding, and yeah, I think that's looking good as well. So it'll give some nice RGB glow out as well to the back of the system. So I like how that's looking. And then front radiators in as well. I just had to drill out the holes for the bottom fan. There is one thing though that I need to look at, and it's going to be something that we'll take a look at probably in the next video because we're pushed for time in this one. Now the plan at the top of the case was to fit in a flat reservoir like this, but with these big 45mm thick radiators and a 360 flat reservoir, we're struggling for space up there. So there's a couple of options. One is to switch these radiators out for thinner, maybe 30mm radiators. The only problem with that, and I don't know whether you guys have been having the same problems as well, trying to get hold of some EK radiators at the moment is quite difficult because EK is in the process of making the transition from the Coolstream radiators to the new surface radiators. So stock levels are a bit difficult at the moment, shall we say. So there's either that option is putting the thinner radiators in, or maybe swapping this FLT 360 reservoir for a smaller 241 or maybe a 280. I think a 240 might work better because it's going to stand a bit out from the radiators anyway, so it's not going to kind of flow as well. If it was a 280, it'd probably stand out even further. So that's a decision I'm going to make. I'm going to have a look at that in between this video and the next one, and also in the next video as well. I'd like to get this case all painted up and looking more like how it's going to do towards the end of the series. So while we're off camera between this video and the next one, I'll be dismantling everything again. Seems a bit counterproductive when I've just put it all together, but it's all part of the modding thing. We have come as far as we can for this video, I think, and for now it's looking good. I'm really pleased with how it's looking. It's, you know, exactly how I want it to. As I said, with this at the top, this reservoir, I'm going to do some mods to this reservoir as well, and maybe adapt it from just being a reservoir to almost like a distro plate. So I'll probably put some baffles in here and drill some more inlets and outlets, so then I can just have vertical tubing from the graphics card going here and vertical tubing from the CPU block going there, and work out how I'm going to connect the radiators up to that as well. So although it's a flat reservoir at the moment, the pump's going to be removed, that's going to be blanked off, and it's going to work more as a distro plate. That's the plan anyway. So that's another thing we'll be looking at in the next video as well, adapting that, painting the case up, deciding whether we switch to smaller radiators or a smaller reservoir, and just basically tidying things up and getting it looking more like the system we want it to look like towards the end of this video. So I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen so far. If you have, let me know what you think to how the system's taking shape in the comments section, and also let me know if there's anything you would change on this. Would you switch to thinner radiators, or would you go to a smaller flat reservoir up at the top? Let me know what you think. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you've enjoyed the project so far. If you have, then don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. If you are a fan of what we do here at Kit Guru and want to help support us, why not head over to the store and pick up some merch? You can also subscribe to our Patreon. And as always, if you want to catch up on the in-depth technical reviews, head over to the website.